All right. Um, so I've been thinking about how I want to approach this. There's lots of actually this talk is somewhat inspired from having a conversation with my friend Dawood. Um, but I also think it's highly related to becoming a man and what that means. So there's this aspect. Just to before I begin, there's something that Rumi talks about. It's in Persian. It's a Persian word. It's called hamdami, and hamdami is basically the bond between sensuousness, and spirituality. And I think that becoming a man needs it needs both. You need to have those two together. Um, so I guess I'm just going to share my experience, and because I see that there's a lot of young men looking for physical teachers, for teachers that actually exist. Um, I am not opposed to young men looking at older male teachers that are actually here. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I am somewhat um, skeptical, you could say. Uh, and the reason why that is, well, actually, I don't even want to call it skeptical, is that there is another way. What I'm trying to say is that you don't have to have a actual physical alive male teacher to um, find your initiation, find some way to get to become a man. You don't need that. And so what I'm trying to say is that there are ways to find your initiation, right? To find your invisible teachers, your teachers that don't exist. um, and for me, uh, I think people people know. For me, it's Rilke, right? It's Rilke. There's something about Rainer Maria Rilke that he just I just feel deeply connected to him, you know, as if he were my actual father. Um, and, but there is something to say about that, right? So one, finding your initiation is not only learning to admire or admiring, just in my context, like finding my initiation isn't enough just to admire uh, Rilke, right? It's not enough to admire him. You have to deeply immerse yourself into what made him him. What made him him. Um, as you can tell, there's some very strong ties because I also want to be like I am very poetic in nature, right? By nature, I'm very poetic. So when I look at Rilke, for me, he is like my spiritual father, right? Now, in order for me to find my initiation, I need to immerse myself into what did Rilke do? What made Rilke Rilke? And when you start chasing that thread, right, it's not enough just to find out what he did, but to find out who was his teacher, because now you're building a sort of lineage of masters, right? You're going through a lineage of masters, a lineage of teachers, right? Finding Rilke for me has opened a doorway of teachers that were before him, right? It's a doorway for my masculinity. And there's a very common theme with both of them, right? And it has to do with this sort of mastering, this perseverance of mastering solitude. That's what I realized. That, and so this initiation, right, begins with solitude, right? What they did, what Rodin did, what Auguste Rodin did, and what he taught to Rilke. Uh, there's another thing that Auguste Rodin told Rilke, because Rilke used to be the kind of poet, and this is very common. I've done this till now, basically. I'm going to start practicing this other thing. Auguste Rodin would say, go outside, find something, and stare at it. Stare at it for a long time until the words come to you. And there's a famous poem by Rilke called the Panther, the Black Panther, I believe. And that was him actually taking Auguste Rodin's advice. He went to the zoo, and I guess he stared at that panther for a really, really long time. And that's how he came up. And I guess those are the words that came out finally from Rilke, which is which really shows that this idea of, because it's a very common thing about artists that, I'm going to wait for my inspiration. But I realize that now with poetry it has to be completely different. That if I want to become a man, this idea of solitude, sort of like mastering my solitude, is part of my initiation. Doing the work, doing that serious, intense work of staring at something for so long that the words begin to come to me. This to me, in my opinion, would be what it is for me to become a man, right? And it's funny because by nature I'm actually very impatient. I'm very impatient, and I don't necessarily like waiting, you could say. So there is something there for me that will initiate me and help me along in becoming a man. And of course, now that I know that Auguste Rodin is kind of like the master of my master, right? Rilke's my invisible teacher, and then Rilke had Rodin as his teacher. Rodin was influenced by Dante's Inferno. Rodin was influenced by Baudelaire, right? I recently looked. There's a very common theme with all of these men, all of them, and I see the very attributes in myself. The very common theme is that all of these men suffered intensely, but the interesting thing is that they saw those sufferings as a contact with something that was beautiful. I believe there's a poem by Baudelaire about him being in the slums, and he basically beautifies it. Like, he makes it like a beautiful thing, where people would typically paint it as ugly. He painted it as beautiful. So there is something to be said about that. And so as I'm, as I'm kind of going through this journey, I'm going through this initiation, through Rilke and Auguste Rodin, and learning about Baudelaire and learning about Balzac, because Balzac was also somebody that Rodin took a lot of, he took an affinity to as well. And it's funny because I'm also reading Dante's Inferno now. Um, there are things, that are being said by all of my teachers, my lineage of teachers here, that are teaching me something about myself, that this whole journey becomes my invisible teacher, right? And so basically what I'm saying is that you don't have to, like, for example, like Jordan Peterson is like a very common like figure to attach yourself to and look at as becoming a man. I mean, if you feel pulled to him like that, but see, the thing is, it's not enough to become attached to Jordan Peterson. Who does Jordan Peterson talk about a lot? He talks a lot about Carl Jung, Dostoevsky. So you need to go diving into Carl Jung and into Dostoevsky. You need to, if you really have an affinity to Peterson like that, those are the lineage of his teachers, right? And I promise you, your interaction with Dostoevsky is going to be probably a little different, right? Because I'm assuming every teacher interacts with their student a little differently. um, so that means when I start thinking about Auguste Rodin, it's going to be a completely different experience for me, because guess what? I'm not Rilke, but there is something there for me. There's something there I'm going to learn. I'm going to take as a student, as a a person becoming a man in that sense, right? Um, so I am all supportive about these male communities that want to guide men and want to foster a type of environment so you can become a man. You know, I'm I'm supportive of those things, but for me, I it doesn't have to be that route. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say, is that it doesn't have to be that route. Um, and I notice it in me very viciously that I'm a very solitary person. Rainer Maria Rilke, again, very solitary person. Auguste Rodin, a very solitary person. So there is a theme, there is attributes and a sort of fostering, right? And just to kind of bring up Aristotle for a moment, you know, I don't think being a man is something like you give somebody a pill. You can just give everybody the same pill and be like, look, if you follow this and take this pill, then you become a man. Uh, no, it's different doses and different requirements for everybody, for every boy, every man. It is a different dose and different method, and different take. And so that's why it can't just be about becoming a man. It has to be about finding your initiation first. And before you even find your initiation, you need to find your who pulls you so intensely that if you were to not even read the name, you'd be like, I feel like I know this person, you know? Um, like I feel so deeply connected to this person in some way, you know, some fashion. I feel like I am a part of this person. So that's the beginning. And for me, that's like actually the exciting part, you know, going finding that because let me tell you, I I've never had such a strong reaction until basically I found Rilke. And it's funny because he subverts all the things of what we would call typically a negative emotion, right? Like sadness for Rilke is something that actually fosters your real power. And so does loneliness. Loneliness and sadness fosters, like they are like almost the foundational beds for your hidden power. So, you know, it's funny how that um, that completely changed me, right? That just completely um, stirred something so deep that, you know, it's almost like I had woken up, you know, like somebody had like slapped me out of my illusions. Um, so I guess now I have to stand and stare at something intently until words come up to me. Which actually, you know what? That's actually a common. That's actually there's a similar practice in the Eastern area, the Eastern world. I don't know if it's like Buddhist or Taoist. I think it's Taoist. They will stare at an object for so long that they will actually speak as if they are the object. That's how they write their poetry. So, and that's a very interesting way to connect to the world, in my opinion. Um, and it's funny because when I read their poetry, it showed me how disconnected I was to things, just things in general, like a cup, you know, an animal, and so on. So, uh, there's this is exciting. You know, it's an exciting journey. And so you know, I feel like I'm going through it right now, and you know, the changes are there. They're there. But anyways, that's all I really wanted to say about this idea of becoming a man and finding your initiation, and that you don't need an actual physical teacher. You don't need that. The whole journey itself can be your invisible teacher. Um, you just need to find somebody that actually sparks something in you intensely, and then chase that line of thread, chase it as far as you can. Um, you know, kind of like do this master of lineages, like who was his master and who was his master and who was his master. Um, and the funny thing about that is the more you do that, I feel like it actually changes you. It's gonna make you be. You're not gonna come out to be the same person that you were when you started. But it also matters that you incorporate some of the things that they did, just to, you know, it's funny because like I'm not advocating for like some type of like severe religious like practice. But what I'm advocating for when I say that you should try to do what they did is that when you try to do what they did, you put yourself in their presence, if that makes any sense. Right? You put yourself in their presence. So if I want to try out this exercise about staring at something for so long that the words come up to me, I feel like a part of me is going to feel like so deeply connected to Rodin and Rilke because they both did it, right? They both did it. And it's like as a student, you know, that's just a bewildering experience just thinking about that. Um, so yeah, that's it. That's all I really wanted to say. All right. You guys take care. Bye.